You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nubs. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry armed women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Key, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
I'm talking about shout it going crazy. People going crazy in these motherfuckers. Run that shit back, man.
But it means nothing. Nothing. Got a woman on the day. Man made the car. Carry the heavy load. Man made the electrolyte to take us out of the dark. Man made the boat for the water like the 7-millimeter. Man thinks about a little bit of baby girl and a baby boy. Man make them happy because man make them strong. But after man make everything we can, do you know that man makes money? To buy from other men. This is a man's world.
Greetings, Black family. Greetings. And thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced. This is Grand Rising with Shabaka and the Chase, Season 10, Episode 15 of Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced. And on this Grand Rising with Shabaka and the Chase, we'll be discussing several topics in these crazy political times of 2025 under the Trump regime. And Elon Musk, otherwise known as Big Must or the Musty Man. And we got that, and then we got the truth about Elon Musk and his family's Neo-Colonialist Apartheid Origins. Then we got a from Miriam Makeba. Shout out to Miriam Makeba, who was both Hugh Master Caleb and Kwame Ture's wife.
Yeah, may she rest in power.
You Can't Expect the Invaders to write the truth about Africa. And then we'll have an open mic discussion. Anything else we would like to discuss, please join us on StreamYard, YouTube, Frontline Black News. The links to all of our channels are in the chat, including Jay Millie's. And there's also a GoFundMe for Lady Che and myself to move, because we're in the process of moving. Me first, I'm going to be moving to another spot here in Denver. And Lady Che is in the process of looking for another place to live. So greetings, Shabaka from the Mile High incoming illegal migrant flooded city, soon to be deported and arrested city.
All right, and greetings from Sin City, where fortunes and have been lost right here and fortunes made, And then also too is that update, I just saw the Las Vegas Review Journal. They made an arrest in a case out here that they had with a guy who was burning up the Teslas and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so yep. So it's cloudy here. Hey twin, how you doing? Okay, and so we're gonna see how that story there unfolds. Okay, and then the cold part about it is, ladies and gentlemen, is that once again, old Donald Duck is doing his thing. You know what I mean? And tariffs is going up on everything, and there's no tether zone yet. And Donald Duck, you know what I mean, and old Elon Musk, and well, it is what it is, Black family. What are we gonna do, to preserve ourselves with it? You see, so we got to start building up our own businesses, and then also too within our community and the diaspora, we got to have a sense of family. It's because they don't care where we're from, rather if it's New York City, rather if it's Oakland, rather if it's Johannesburg. Yeah, there's Miriam Makeba right there. You see, so let's get this show started. And I take that you're going to start off here with Mama Africa. Okay.
No, she's number 3 on the U.S. had 4 years list. I'm going to start with Elon Musk, the Musty Man.
Oh, okay.
Big Musk.
Okay.
So Big Musk apparently has been demoted. So MSDNC is going to give us an update on that. And then we're going to go into his history, his family's history in South Africa, Xania, with the apartheid and neo-Nazi movements.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Of Biden governance, and now the Trump-Musk agenda has swiftly eclipsed those democratic appeals to what competent government can be, with these new MAGA demands to just shrink it all. Democrats fighting these cuts have sometimes struggled to explain what they are actually defending about government, as the party stands also accused of losing faith with some working people and running some blue cities which are no longer as livable as they once were.
Yeah, like Denver, Colorado.
The cost of living in New York City has skyrocketed.
It is becoming increasingly difficult to rent an apartment in New York City. Rent grew 7 times faster than wages last year.
San Francisco's new mayor is trying to tackle the homelessness crisis in a new way.
They are doing it wrong here. No wonder why we've had so many people move from San Francisco to Florida.
Approximately 8,000 people are on the streets every single night.
Those are real problems. Housing shortages in big cities have people leaving, including departing blue bastions like Manhattan and California, often citing the cost of living. San Francisco's typical home is 5 times what a typical home in Houston costs. That's one of the many facts cited by the New York Times' Ezra Klein for why, even apart from this MAGA moment, Democratic leaders must provide the fruits of effective government and a liberalism that builds tangible.
Hold on, let me read this shit so they don't start. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Oh, we were able to get the channel back, Shabaka, because I disputed it. I told them, look, we've been doing the copyright. We read the copyright. It's been scrolling. So ain't no damn copyright infringement. So misses with that bullshit YouTube.
Yeah.
Results, he writes, rather than using taxes to just subsidize people's efforts to say, buy into a status quo where the price keeps rising. And if this is a bit familiar in our politics, there is one disruptive activist candidate who put it memorably in a blue city, by the way, the rent is too damn high.
I represent the rent is too damn high party. The people I'm here to represent can't afford to pay their rent. They're being laid off right now as I speak. They can't eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Listen, someone's stomach, child's stomach just growled. Did you hear it? Gotta listen like me.
Fact check, true.
Yeah, remember when he did that speech? I was under Obama's administration. The rents were damn high.
Yeah.
The rent was and is too high in so many places. So when we think about dealing with those problems directly on the facts, that is Ezra Klein's new book, An Approach in Abundance. He advocates going to the root of those problems I mentioned, confronting scarcity, the mindset for governing, and even some of the liberal policies that he writes have at times made it all worse. New York Times columnist, podcaster, and author, Ezra Klein joins us now. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You have the book. You say there's scarcity and there's a governing mindset problem, and even well-intentioned liberals have at times made it worse. Explain.
So there is a cut in both parties around scarcity. And I'm going to start on the right because I think it's where people's minds are right now. There is no issue Donald Trump does not look at and see a way to give us a future of less. We don't have enough housing. He wants to close the border. We don't have enough manufacturing. He wants to put down huge tariffs, throw markets into crisis, and cut down trade. We don't have a responsive enough government. So what does Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and Russ Vought do? They take a wrecking ball of the parts of government that do work. On the right, you have a huge scarcity agenda. And that's because for the right, scarcity is the lifeblood of populist politics. If people feel they don't have enough, they're afraid of anybody who might take what they have. The problem is the left has kind of bought into this. We have our own versions of it, versions of environmentalism that fear more people and don't want to build new energy. But we also just are bureaucratic. If the right is autocratic, we get bureaucratic. We don't make government work. We don't bust through rules that are outdated. We allow things to happen, like under Joe Biden, $42 billion for rural broadband, hooking up no people to rural broadband, or $7.5 billion for electric vehicle chargers, not building electric vehicle chargers. If you want to marginalize dangerous political movements, you need your own to actually work, to bring down the cost of living and give people enough of what they need.
We have exactly that data point you mentioned because it jumped out to us as well from your book. And some people watching might just be open-minded. Mm-hmm. Some people might be rooting for what you call that liberal approach, but just like rooting for the Mets, doesn't mean you have to be blind to the mistakes, even though we know how polarized things are. And so I thought this was interesting. You say Biden's policies had these sparks they wanted to make, but the infrastructure bill had, as you mentioned, the $7 billion for 500,000 electric charging stations. More than 2 years after that passed, only 7 chargers were up and running. What are you saying there? That they had a good idea and they did it poorly, or that they need to change what is defined as progress?
We need to change how we govern. So Brian Deese, the former head of Biden's National Economics Council, he just wrote a great piece in Foreign Affairs, very much along these lines, called something like Can America Build Faster? And he says, look, we passed all this great legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, the CHIPS and Science Act. And if we do not make it faster and easier and smoother to turn that into construction in the real world, the legislation isn't going to work. There's a dangerous tendency among liberals, and I've covered policy forever. And so I've both seen this, and at times I have made this mistake myself, to just kind of get obsessed with the number on a bill. Mm-hmm. And there's a big fight, and then at the end you're like, thank God we passed $42 billion for rural broadband, or $395 billion for climate investments, or whatever it is, as if the number on a bill is the end goal. But the number on a bill isn't the end goal. You can spend a lot on something and it never makes anything in the real world. In the book, I end up spending a lot of time on California's high-speed rail debacle. The problem there is not that we didn't spend money. The problem is that it has not built working high-speed rail. And we can talk about why this is, but there is a culture of procedural governance on the liberal side. Look, the right, it's going way too far and it's going towards a vision that's terrible. But on the left, we don't insist that the money we spend creates the outcomes we seek. And when it doesn't, and I think this is the real fatal sin, when it doesn't, we don't go back and fix what failed. We don't make sure it'll be different next time. We just kind of don't talk about it and move on.
Yeah, you cause problems, and then you act like you got the solution to the problem you caused.
Right.
Fuck out of here. You
Yeah,
see how white supremacy takes both sides of the argument?
Oh, yes, sir. You know, it's because, you know, these Democrats, man, and these Repubs are two sides of the same coin that we've been saying all along. Okay. And then to mention the fact this dude, Stinky Bird, is not an elected official anyway. You see what I mean? All right. So he has just too much power. And why is he in on these quote unquote U.S. Department meetings? You know what I mean? Like education, things of that nature right there. You know, he's not an elected official. So, you know, he is where he's from, that we're going to get into later, you know, for all our listeners to know. And then on top of it, Black family, you know, we are all we got, that I've been saying, as you know, Brother Che, for at least the last 12 years, you see, and it's up to us to take care of us. And so then you got Governor Rolaids and Jasmine Crockett business and stuff like that. Then you got, you know, all these Black politicians out here grandstanding who are not doing shit for the Black community. You see?
Yeah. And then you're damned if you do, damned if you don't in Dallas, because the dude that's running it, Jasmine Crockett, he don't support reparations either. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're in Dallas, I say you just sit that shit out. But don't vote for either one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I said,
or run it in.
Yeah. And so instead of us having these ass-scratching Negro leaders who are not going to do nothing for us, okay, what we need to do now is the time, which is essential now for us to build up our own infrastructures. But we got a lot of issues in the Black community that we have addressed. And then, two, is forcing us that we're going to have to work with each other, Black family, because we are all we got.
Yeah, Shabaka, that's what we said. We didn't care if either the jump got in because we knew he was going to apply that pressure and it was going to make us have to get together, to work together, to do something constructive, something productive.
Oh, yes, sir. And even more so now, because with the dumpster putting up here all these tariffs on everything, which is causing everything else to rise, the way you counter the tariffs, the way you counter this high-ass cost of inflation, don't buy the shit. Let it sit on a shelf.
Right.
They say, because when they cannot move that merchandise, believe me, just off the economical law of supply and demand, they will have no choice but to lower the price. You see what I mean? But of course, and what's going to happen with us, okay, is we're going to be the majority of the homeless. You see what I'm saying? Out there. And it's a sad thing to see when we got now going on a second generation, Brother Che, of research that we've done from Oakland to Denver of our people being homeless. We got 2 and 3 generations now that have been homeless. They say you got young adults who ain't never had a place to live. Well, I'll just be homeless. I'll sleep in a tent. So what happens with that? Weather conditions, disease, mental illness. You see what I mean? And you're going to be having more and more people going off into the nut roll is because you can only take so much. It's called pressure. This is why we have to build up our own infrastructures and worry about ourselves. But as soon as we talking about doing stuff for ourselves, well, you guys are racist. There's no such thing as a Black racist because we don't control no police departments. We don't control no major industries. We don't control no major utilities. We don't control no major banks. So we are in no position to implement any kind of racism. I advocate that we quit killing each other. If we disagree, please let us disagree agreeably. You and I do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
And so do you feel like, from the research and reporting you've done, you look at, you mentioned liberal cities, and you look at these experiments overall, you look at it and you think these were good ideas that worked for a time and then failed, or they haven't kept up? And when you mention bureaucracy, I mean, that's what small business owners feel, often apart from politics, is they're trying to do something and they feel like there's all these very vague reasons they're held back, environmental, labor, etc. And a lot of folks think, well, you need some of those protections, but it becomes crushing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you do need some of those protections. You need many of those protections. But I'll give an example here, because I think you're setting me up nicely for it. You have two liberalisms that arise in the 20th century. You have New Deal liberalism, which we all think about, and I think is the dominant narrative of liberalism, FDR liberalism. Sure. And that's a liberalism of building. That creates, even under Dwight Eisenhower, who sort of accepts its premises, the interstate highway system. It creates Social Security. It creates the growth-oriented, modernizing America of the 20th century. But it also, in many ways, goes too far. Those highways are built through a lot of poor and marginalized communities. They're built
like the Dan Ryan Expressway.
We build in ways that are
right, like the Harbor Freeway,
exactly.
Like I-70. I-70 built through a black community. I-25 was built through a black community, a black indigenous community at that. So they can miss that shit.
Yeah, totally.
Terrible for the environment. I grew up outside of California, outside of Los Angeles, and I grew up in a time when you would still wake up and you'd look out and there would be a thick coating of smog, and you'd go outside and you'd feel the acrid air.
Yep. That's when they used to have leaded cars, leaded gasoline. They put
exactly.
Right in the community. Shout out to Tariq Nasheed for hitting College 4. Went into great detail about that shit. The environmental racism with the leaded cars, the leaded gasoline.
Yep. I remember it well.
Yep.
I remember it well. Because in the late 1960s, is that out there in the LA basin of what this individual is talking about, your eyes would burn, where children would have respiratory ailments and diseases, you see. And then in the late 60s, the only time it was clear is when a good rainstorm would come in and blow the smog out. So then in the 70s, the air quality was getting better. Okay, so then that's when they started making the economy cars, because at one time you was only getting like 5-6 miles a gallon, and then about the mid 70s they started making them where you get up to 12 to 15 miles per gallon, and then they were quote unquote making them more and more fuel efficient, but then they kept raising the price of the gas. You see what I mean? So this is a situation of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Also talk about the gas. What was it? The gas crisis in the 70s. What was it? Where people were, what was the word? Having to siphon gas.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. People was getting busted each other, siphoning gas out their cars and all that old type of crazy stuff. You see what I mean? Okay. And then of course too, is that when you get guys like Donald Duck and Stinky Bird, you see what I'm saying? They only care about themselves and they're rich. So I don't understand how come the U.S. Congress, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, he owns them too, is that they have not started any impeachment proceedings against this individual for being incompetent.
Oh, they started them. Remember Al Green, who was waving his pimp cane? He did the same thing.
And they censured him.
Yeah. Remember
they censured him.
Remember he issued the articles of impeachment in 2017 too.
Yeah, and what happened to him? Yeah, so Trump got impeached. He was impeached twice in his first regime. You see what I'm saying? So quite naturally, of course, he did damage control, is because now he's got a Republican Congress and a Republican president. You see what I mean? Yeah, so for all practical purposes, the impeachment is going to go nowhere.
Right. It's just a nothing burger.
Yeah, exactly. You'd say, and this dude is going to be up there, and then what's going to happen is, J.D. Vance, he's going to be your next president. And this is something I'm hoping that I'm wrong about.
Or Bush Jr.
air in your lungs. So we passed a lot of legislation, much of it environmental, but not only, that was about stopping the government and corporations from doing things recklessly. So we have all these environmental review laws, and that all made sense. It was all a good idea. But two things happen. One is that these laws grow, they change over time, they get more procedural craft. Environmental reviews used to be 7 pages, 12 pages. They would take a couple weeks, a couple months. Now the average one is in the thousands of pages, and it takes 4.5 years. I mean, that's real. And it's a problem, by the way. Joe Biden, when he was doing his CHIPS bill, he exempted the semiconductor factories that he was trying to bring back to the country from environmental review, because if he didn't, it would just take too long. So even liberals are beginning to try to dodge this stuff. But the other problem is that the problem we had flipped. If the problem in sort of late mid-century America was maybe we were building too much, maybe we were building too heedlessly. Now we have climate change. Now we have this belief, correctly, that our only pathway out of catastrophic climate change is to decarbonize the economy, which means building a lot of green energy infrastructure really, really fast. Our laws aren't set up to do that. In every generation, you got to make sure the solutions of the past era don't become the problems of the current era. And if they do.
That's why you always say, Shabaka, take what is useful and leave what is useless.
Yes, sir. You see what I'm saying? And that even applies to this day. You say in these contemporary times, in the origin and the originator. Hey, Mac 285. Okay, and the it's all good, Mac 285. Yeah, we're just on the first story, man. And so Mac 285, yes, sir. Okay, we're gonna try to keep it on fire. You know, twin, yeah. So what it is this is the more reason why all we got Black family is each other, let's say. So all the factions that we have in the Black community, we have no choice but to come together now, is because this stuff is going to get extremely serious very, very quickly. And when I'm talking about very, very quickly, I'm talking about in the next few weeks, man, not a few months. You know what I'm saying? Not a couple of years. I'm talking about in the next few weeks. They want to put the tariffs on everything. The way you bring it down, don't buy the shit. You say, don't buy it.
Shabaka,
let it sit there and rot.
We just can't come together. We got to come together for a constructive and a productive purpose.
Oh, absolutely. It's because we are all we got, Black family. We are all we got. You say, and everybody else sees that except us. Why do you think they go through so much effort to keep us divided? This is why I identify as a diasporic African. Let it rot, 2025, right. Now you got old Governor Rolaids on his Hot Wheels down there in Great State, Texas. Governor Bud, you know what I'm saying? And they coming down on Jasmine Crockett. She may be a crook. She may be like the mayor of Dalton, Illinois. Okay, fine. They ain't doing nothing no different that these damn repubs and white Democrats have been doing. You see what I mean? Nigga Jim Clyburn and all them fools, Uncle Tim Scotts, we got to turn our backs on them. They do not have our interests at heart. And the sad part about it is their asses is going to be out there homeless too.
Yep.
And we need donations, people. We need donations to keep these platforms up. We need donations.
That's right, Shabaka. So if y'all can help us out, hit the PayPal.
Please, yeah, we're sending out a SOS to save our stations. You know what I mean? See? And that's all we got. That is all we got. And then also, too, Brother Che, on a small note, I did get a text this morning from a leading scholar who we're going to try to get up here on the platform. You know what I mean? But they need introduction, body, and conclusion. You know what I'm saying? And whatnot. And then, of course, Black family. We have a lot of disputes within our community, but please let us disagree agreeably because we are all we got.
Thank you, Mac 285.
Yeah, appreciate you, Mac 285. Appreciate you. And whatever that you got going on, Mac 285, we will be more than happy, man, to mention whatever you got going on, man, positive in the community, brother. You know what I'm saying? Hell, I'll ask Brother Che right now, man. You can come up and guest host if you would like.
Yeah. Well, you know, Mac is on the road. He's a truck driver.
Yeah. And hope it's safe out there for you, Mac. Yeah, I always wish the truck drivers the best. It's because they deliver essential goods and services and what have you. And build up black business, young brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? Y'all got something I no longer have. Y'all have youth on your side. Yes, you all could do this. Yes, you all could win. You know, dig into the philosophies of the ancestors. You see what I mean?
Right.
Please, you know, please.
Oh, he said he'll make a grand entrance very soon. Okay, man.
Okay, all righty. All right, yeah, okay, Mac. Yeah, appreciate you, brother. You know what I'm saying? And be safe out there on that highway, man, because I'm getting ready to get on the highway and I'm watching it. Yeah, and self-employed. Now, that's another thing, too, Black family. With this technology, we can self-employ ourselves. You see what I mean? You know, and then for all the factions out there, okay, I know it's difficult, you know what I'm saying? But we are all we got. You see? We are all we got. We can't go out there and allow ourselves to crash and burn, man. And then you got these crazy ass, confused ass busters out here wearing dresses, talking about they women. Come on, we better than that. They have their human rights and they have their civil rights. Now we recognize that, but when it comes to us, you Negroes violated community standards. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they're always telling us we violate community standards, but people come up here and put all kind of hate in our chat rooms and things like that and shut us down. Yeah, you know, yeah, that's it, Mac 285. And if we disagree, people, let us disagree agreeably. You know what I'm saying?
Right. All right, let me.
Because we all we got. We all we got. We all we got.
Let me try to finish the video, Shabak. I want to get to the part where they talk about Musk.
Oh, yeah, stinky bird.
Institutional renewal is our job. It isn't the job of people who lived 50 years ago.
And so your book tackles that, while you, as a New York Times writer and podcaster, have also been keeping a close eye on Elon Musk. You wrote recently that he doesn't want a more capable state. You're kind of calling BS on his claims to efficiency. You wrote he wants a broken state that he can control and corrupt. Explain that, and is there yet, and should there be, a dominant, known, liberal answer to Elon Musk? Who is that person?
I think you can see the Department of Government Efficiency was great branding. A lot of people want something like that. It's a mistake Democrats didn't get to it first. And initially, you have a bunch of Democrats who stand up and they raise their hand and they say, you know, I'd love to help. People like Ro Khanna in the House. And then Musk comes in and shows what this thing really is, which is a smash and grab operation. They are going after parts of government. If you're worried about efficiency, if you're worried about red tape, if you're worried about bureaucracy, you don't slash into the Social Security Administration. Nothing in the government is more efficient than Social Security.
Or, to agree with you, the investigators who probe waste, fraud,
exactly,
abuse.
Right, yes. The investigators, what they want is to control the thing. And this is a mixture of Musk. This is what he did at Twitter. He broke Twitter. He drove people out of Twitter because what he understood about Twitter, which he did not buy to make into a good business, he bought it to use its political power for his own ends. What he understood was that the employees, the institutions.
Also, Shabak, I found out something. You were probably aware of it, but Musk, he owns PayPal too.
Oh man. Oh boy. Okay. Well, that did just ruin my day. I didn't know that. Okay.
He started a whole company back in 1999. Yeah, I found that out yesterday. I was like, what the hell? So we have to find another for the money.
Of it, the structures of it, the processes of it, they were like power centers. And when you conquer a capital city, you've got to break the power centers and take them over yourself. That's how they're treating the federal government. Russ Vought, the head of the OMB, he said, but well before the election, that the civil servants, they will need to be traumatized. That's not the language of efficiency. That's a language of conquering.
And is there a liberal alternative to Musk?
Wow.
You can create.
It's not your job to answer, but I'm
Yes.
curious what you think.
I don't think there is an individual yet. Right. I don't think Democrats have their next leader, and I don't think we know if a leader would sort of absorb what could have been good about something like the Department of Government Efficiency if it was turned towards good goals and do it. But what I do think is there is a possibility for a period here that has a structure of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So thesis, Democrats over time have become the defenders of the institutions. They've become the pro-institutions party. They've become the systems party. A lot of our cranks have kind of been pushed out to the other side, like RFK Jr. Republicans have become the anti-system party. The locus of polarization these days is not really taxes or the Affordable Care Act. Like, doesn't it seem innocent when we were covering that? It's about the legitimacy of the institutions and government itself. So they don't want to make it work. They want to burn it down and take control of it. Maybe there is the possibility here for kind of synthesis. It is true. A lot of institutions in American life.
Maybe we need to burn the shit down. We've been saying that shit for the longest. To start over from scratch with this shit.
Yeah, because we ain't got no choice now.
Are not
you see what I'm saying? And we
It is
ain't
true,
talking
they
about
often have
burning
too much
anything
influence.
down. Just don't spend your money with them. You see?
Yeah.
We got to spend our money with ourselves, and we could do this. And we got to turn our backs on nigga Jim Clyburns, bobblehead Al Sharptons, messy Jessies. You know what I'm saying?
Before you burn it all down, though, give reparations.
Yeah, exactly. You see what I'm saying? And then the cold part about it is, Mac 285, the reparations ain't going to be doing nothing but being infused into the U.S. economy anyway, as we build up our own infrastructures and what have you. And then start hitting these local politicians to change the business laws so we can build businesses.
You know who you sound like right now, or who sounds like
Who's
you?
that? Who?
Tariq Nasheed. Tariq Nasheed is saying the same thing, like almost verbatim.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then, like I said, and then hopefully I will get over there and get over there to the museum over there that you had told me where it was located at. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's that simple, twin. It's that simple, you know. And like all of y'all in the entertainment and music industry, y'all can pool your resources, man, and you guys can make a difference.
We got to get the house.
Exactly. And we got to get rid of that house nigga syndrome. You know, nigga Jim Clyburns, Tim Scotts.
LeBron James is a house nigga. I'm like,
no, man.
A white podcasters platform the other day, just kissing up the white folks. I'm like,
you see.
And we sitting up here, many of the people in our community sitting up here bigging him up, talking about, well, this is black nepotism. He got his son in the league and all of this. And on the back end, he's sitting up here yucking it up with the crackers, with the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. You see what I'm saying? And look what happened with P. Diddy. And I don't have no judgment on Mr. Combs until everything comes out about him. You see what I mean? You know, and you say, they're out to do a scene. Look what they did to Michael Jackson. Look how they
the power of it when they're not getting it no more.
Yeah, exactly. True. They don't understand the power of the black dollar. Yeah, Mac 285. And let's do that there with the black dollar.
Anthony Davis. You know?
Yeah, you see? Okay, which Anthony Davis are you talking about, Mac 285?
Let's see what he says. But in the meantime, let the video continue, Shabaka. Because they busted going on Musk and what he's been up to, and then we're going to get into his history and his family's history. Apartheid and South.
Overly corporate controlled by money, controlled in ways that don't serve the people they're supposed to serve. And you can make them better. And in order to make them better, you do need to break some glass. But you're not supposed to burn them down. You're not supposed to be lawless. And you're supposed to be clear about what all this efficiency is in service of. Efficiency.
Oh, he said he replaced them with a cracker named Luca. You're a Laker. He's talking about you're a Laker.
Yeah. the Lakers. And we need to control, major pro sports. And we could do it. But you got to have that sense of cohesiveness. You see?
Yeah. Well, we're getting it, Shabaka. We are definitely getting it. You might not see it, but we're getting it. Especially the new media is helping with that a lot. He said Laker, ex-Laker. He's an ex-Laker, Anthony Davis.
Okay, because I do remember there was Anthony Davis who played quarterback at USC, and I don't think he made it into the pros. I'm wondering if that's one of his names.
No, he's talking about the ex-Lakers, Shabaka.
Oh, okay.
He said he blames LeBron. I do too. LeBron, master, we sick.
Yeah, boss, we sick. And then keep in mind is that it's gonna and they're gonna start going after the black athletes as well too.
Oh, they've been going after the black athletes. You see how they do the ones that take a stand, like Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, you see. Man, they tear up their contracts, Yasa Boss James. Yeah.
And we got people in our community that's digging him up. Like, yeah, LeBron is the greatest. He's one of the greatest. And look, he got his son in the league. And isn't this black nepotism? We should be champion black nepotism. We need more black nepotism. That's what you have people saying online, at least about it. All right, I'm gonna let the video continue.
All right.
Towards a better America is something I would support. Efficiency to run the country off a cliff, I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah. And you went full Hegel.
I always try to come here and go full Hegel.
So this is author Ezra. Now I want to go to blogger Ezra. Do you remember blogger Ezra?
Man, it's hard to remember even a couple of years ago. But let's give it a try. We'll shave the beard.
I mean,
take off the suit jacket.
I first got to know you professionally when you were, I believe it was the American Prospect. Right?
Back in the old days.
Writing there, going to Netroots Nation, doing all that. Now you've continued to keep a foot in sort of the new digital space, even though you're at one of the most august institutions around, the New York Times. It's sort of interesting. So I thought, let
the New York Slimes.
Let's break out a little bit. And I asked AI how you would fit in today.
AI.
And then I want to talk to you about today.
Yeah, sure.
So this is a two-parter. This is what AI says.
This is what AI told you.
Yeah, this is all these words are AI.
Okay, great.
Ezra Klein's career, from Netroots blogger to Vox founder to top-tier podcaster, gives him a unique lens on politics online today. He came up in an era when blogs and forums reshaped media, fostering ideological communities. The DNA still shapes today's digital politics, but now the battleground is algorithmically driven, hyper-personalized, and dominated by short-form video. Campaigns weaponize virality, micro-targeting, data-driven messaging. It's more emotional than ever. The attention economy rewards speed over depth, outrage over nuance. By the way, decent points here from the robot. Klein has warned about these shifts. Platforms amplifying division, AI accelerating misinformation, long-form journalism struggling to compete with endless bite-sized content. So first, how's the...
Wow, AI.
It's dangerous. Yeah, it's dangerous because it's a robot. It only knows what is programmed.
Right. And if it ain't us that's programming it, then all it knows is what the oppressor is programming to think. And
the AI doing on understanding you and the world we're in?
Well, that last part isn't true, I don't think.
No, go ahead.
We're in a renaissance of long form. I mean, you're going to put part of this up online, and you're going to put it up in its full length, which you could have never done, 20 years ago on a cable news show. My podcasts, they go up at, an hour 20, 2 hours. The other day I taped 4 hours with Lex Friedman. He'll put that up at 4 hours if he feels like it.
Did you find out if he's an industry plant?
It was more about me than about him.
It's a Lex Friedman joke.
There is, I think, actually, because of how much short form content is out there, a lot of desire for long form content. The worm always turns on that kind of thing. And so there's a huge amount of long form content. The problem is a lot of it's not very rigorous. The issue with what's going on, I think, in digital media is not that the explosion of possibility of the internet has made us all short formers or all long formers. It's that institutions form us. Journalism has a lot of problems. But that blogger you talked about, that young Ezra, he got a job as a writing fellow at the American Prospect.
Right.
And he was hired by a guy named Michael Tomasky, currently the editor of the New Republic. And when he wrote his first story for the American Prospect, which Mike Tomasky said, go find out what's hot in poverty policy, which is the kind of thing we did there, and turned it in, Mike said, this isn't even a piece of journalism. I hadn't called enough people. I hadn't done the reporting. I hadn't done the work. The institutions of journalism, for all their flaws, one of the things they do is form you towards a kind of rigor. Make you do the calls, make you do the research, see if you've actually tested your assumptions. And I don't want to be ironic about things. I don't want to be naive. We fail. We fail all the time. We don't train people well enough sometimes. But this world doesn't do any of the training. And there's a lot out there that's going at 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours with millions of people behind it. And what it doesn't have is rigor.
Right. It's just talk. I mean, it's just talking, but it's funny coming from you because you had this foot in both worlds. It made you the kind of hybrid journalist you are today, right? You're at the New York Times, but I think it's fair to guesstimate that the bulk of your reach is from your listeners on a medium that the New York Times wasn't in when your career started, right?
Sure.
So I guess my question for you is, what portion or how much of that open-minded attitude towards digital is powering you, and how much of that is levied by what you just said, that, hey, we can't all just be talking. Talking is not facts. Talking is often the opposite of
Well, I like the talking. I just want it done really, really well. Look, I don't think what powers my career or what powers your career is formats. It's not.
You're right, Joe Cool. I don't trust it at all. Yeah, Joe Cool, you're right. I don't trust it at all.
I don't trust it at all either. I haven't trusted it for at least 20 years.
And it's not to be trusted.
Right.
Not that we're open-minded to digital. I do think people want good content. I think they want good journalism. I think they want good conversations. And what the media does sometimes is create rigor. What it doesn't do often enough is change. It can get very narrow in its boundaries. One reason I'm very open-minded to new formats, and always have been, is that I think I'm fundamentally optimistic about how good the work you can do is in almost every space. I look at every format as a set of constraints, and constraints are enablers of creativity. And the downside of institutions, we were sort of talking about this around government, is that they can be high on rigor and low on creativity. And the downside of individuals is that they can be high on creativity and low on rigor. Sometimes you need to move fast and break things. Sometimes you need to know what not to break. And so all these things offer possibilities, but they come with a lot of problems. I mean, look, I think this is a pretty dark time for journalism and for the media. It doesn't matter how many possibilities there are in digital media. We traded a much better business model that we had, 15, 20 years ago for a much worse one now, and the middle has been hollowed out of a lot of journalism. My worry is we're not going to train that next generation of people, that I wouldn't have had a place to go to get the training today. So yeah, I myself have wonderful opportunities to try out a lot of different things, but I worry.
Yeah, because you're a white, looking like cisgender male. So of course you got all the opportunities in the world. But
yeah, and then the
$1 million
part about it is, yeah, and they keep trying to force that agenda on our children.
Oh, yeah, they definitely is. Definitely.
Yeah, for zero population growth. You say.
Yeah, because they're at minus birth rate.
Yeah, and then when we mention such things, they tell us that we're racist. And also, for somebody, yeah, and I would like for somebody to define, in our chat room, of what a black racist is, or better yet, does it even exist?
It's laughable to me.
Yeah.
about the people who won't have opportunities to get that internship, or the local communities that don't get that journalism. I mean, this is not a moment that makes me feel optimistic. The moment I came up in was a good moment because you kind of had all these things operating at a high level of their potential.
Yeah.
Right now, you have a lot of wreckage and people trying to make homes in the ashes.
You mentioned the moment you came up in. Since we put aside time for a longer conversation, we have.
They literally are trying to make homes out the ashes. You see what happened in California with the wildfires.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some video of that.
And now you got fires on the East Coast all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Remember, they was trying to take all that land from the black farmers and the black families that have owned lands for generations in the southeast, and now these fires are starting.
All of a sudden.
And they try to put a railroad through that one family. Remember, we covered they was trying to put a railroad that one family's land. And they fighting it tooth and nail, as they should.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know,
you probably haven't seen in a minute.
Let's see it.
Young Ezra, let's take a look.
Progressives haven't latched onto a few policies as values. Higher taxes are not a value for us. They're a means. Stronger defense is not a value for us. It's, again, a means.
But you believe presidents hire U.S. attorneys because they're pals and they deserve a little political favor, or do you think they hire them because they're the best lawyer in town?
I think that whatever reason they hire them, you can't fire them midterm for political reasons.
Yes. Progressives, I think, believe if you're going to go and ask them, they'd probably say, well, we believe in fairness. We believe in, kind of opportunity. We believe, people should treat each other in their environment well.
Yes, you absolutely can fire someone midterm for political reasons. It's not against the law.
That's a wonderful way to run a government.
Well, I don't. How old are you, and how naive are you that you honestly think that this town isn't built on political patronage?
And how cynical are you that you believe you should support that political patronage and excuse anything they do? Scooter Libby should pay no price. A prosecutor should get fired. Yeah. This is how we're doing it now.
They're kind of very basic moral values, but they're not policy values.
That was my first hardball appearance, right?
I don't know. You tell me.
I think
that was him back then. All right, so Joe, Twin has said there's no such thing as a black racist.
Which it isn't.
And then Joe Cool said racist is anyone who believes one race is better than another. And then he said this dude looks so greasy. Yeah, he's probably one of them. He look like a grease ball. Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to Webster, yes, that is correct. But there's a dynamic that's missing, and that is white supremacy.
Yeah, that they don't want to talk about, that they want to sweep up under the rug.
So based off of that basic definition, anybody can be racist. But there's more to it, and shout out to Dr. Nellie Fuller Jr. and shout out to Dr. Chris Wilson, who broke it down even further than that into the many institutions of which racism and white supremacy controls. So we don't control a white person's livelihood. We can't control where they live, where they go to school, where they send their kids to school, what loans they can get. We don't control none of that. So how can we be racist? That's where Shabak is coming with it. And myself, because I don't believe we can be racist. We can be prejudiced, but we can't be racist.
Because we don't have the institutions to implement any type of racism.
Yeah, we don't control economics. We don't control education. We don't control entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, war, and religion. We don't control none of those areas.
Right. Yeah. And I'm checking my hate mail right here this morning, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay, racism is to control the economy, and you're going to find that out there on the next clip with Sister Miriam. Unfair control of the industry, exactly, man.
The next clip, Shabaka, is about Elon Musk and his colonial origins, neo-colonial origins.
think so. I think
it's some of the earliest stuff we could find.
Man, Republicans defending firing everybody for political reasons. Some things actually don't change as much as you think they do.
What do you see in your younger self now?
I see that I'm young, man. I see that
Looks like a young guy. Now. Yeah. But what do you learn from that? If somebody's watching, you just mentioned it around the circle of what young people coming up today, they might be making it on a pod or a series of TikToks. What would you tell that guy?
Look, my younger self did well for, in my view, not a very dissimilar reason to why I do well now, which is that there's always a market for the people who are really doing the reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a name as a blogger for reading a lot of.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. So you was taxing them, but who's bringing the drugs in? It's not us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I think I was Black Power, yes, sir. But that's one area. And like you said, economics, we don't control economics. That's the first area of human activity that we don't have no control over.
Yeah.
And we the only people who spend side of our community like we do. Our money don't even stay in our community for 6 hours.
Yeah. Sometimes less than that.
Lucky if it's 6 hours to stay in our community. Go spend with everybody else and then complain about not having nothing.
Yeah.
So there is power in the black dollar, and it's time we start exercising it.
Yes, sir.
We damn near have no choice. Exactly, Max 285. Oh, Joe Cool has a question. He says, "How do we turn this around?"
Okay, Joe Cool. The way how we turn it around, man, is we start building business. This is just a suggestion. So for those of you who are fortunate enough to accumulate some wealth, man, start opening up some businesses. You know, restaurants, hardware stores, something essential for our community. And another thing, too, to protect our little children, too, particularly when they go into these public indoctrination centers. You see what I mean? Commonly referred to as public schools.
Mac 285 says, "We slowly but surely keep everything black." Yep.
And that's what we have to do.
Yep. Do for
exactly,
self
twin. Exactly. Do for self as much as possible. And your generations, gentlemen and ladies, you guys could do this. You see what I'm saying? This is why, you know, they keeping our youth so divided amongst themselves. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the youth is waiting on us. They watching us. They watching what we do. They watching what we spend our money on. They watching who we spend with.
Oh yeah, and another thing, when they want to do all these internet surveys, delete and block, because it ain't nothing but intelligence gathering operation. Oh, we'll take our survey and all that. How is that? Delete and block. You see?
That shit out.
Yeah.
That's right. The essentials one. The essentials are what we focus on, right?
Yeah, you see, because we're all we got. We're all we got.
All right, he about to get to your boy, Tricky Dick, and some of the presidents that.
Oh, okay. Oh, Tricky, huh?
Very esoteric healthcare policy research. And there were a couple of us, I'll say, since we're in the longer conversation, one of the real inspirations and pioneers in that space, Kevin Drum, Cal Pundit, just passed away a couple weeks ago, which is a great loss and a huge inspiration to me and to many others. One of the things the internet did is created rooms for nerds to really do nerdy work. And it proved there was a market for that because these things are important. People want to know how they work. It actually matters to know how they work.
And to dig into that, though, can you think of a blog or a written format like that that's launched in the last 5 years of a new voice in politics?
Oh, yeah, there are a bunch, man. There's a lot of Substackers who are doing, I think, really interesting and important work right now.
That are new.
Yeah, they're new. I mean, John Gans, who's got a Substack, I think it's called The Unpopular Front. I think his work has been very strong. I don't know if it's in the last, 5 years. I'd have to go back and see who has actually launched in the past days. But there are a number of people
because what I see,
voices I didn't used to listen to.
I see a lot more in Pod and TikTok, and I'm not saying whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, like the new black media.
But I'm seeing that verbal oral form being the lowest barrier to entry for people who are good enough at it, which I think is interesting. And I've seen on the activist side, right? You can make that video. I'm here. This happened.
Right. Look at the comments, Shabaki. And don't sell out no zippity doo-dah, zippity day.
Nothing's plenty for me. You know, that type of foolishness. You see what I mean?
No, yes, about some.
You know?
Right, it has to stop being.
Yeah, man.
285.
Yeah, man, 285. Yeah, exactly, man. Build up the black industries, young black men and women. You know what I'm saying? Put your own people to work first. Now, remember, Dumpster and Stinkyberg got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what it means is you could hire an all-black firm. And then when these OTBs come in there to your firm, be extremely cautious about what you share with them, because the only thing they're going to do is take it and run with it to build up their own industries. Look at rock and roll.
Oh, man. Yeah. Talk about it, Shabaki.
Look at rock and roll. If you're going to Yasa boss, make sure your boss is black. Exactly. And Joe Cool is laughing at it. And then, too, for you black bosses out there, you know, don't be so quick to come down on your own people. The key is to keep that girl up out of there, because he's going to come in there like a snake. He's going to slither. And the next thing you know, you bought out. No, well, man, we're all inclusive and all
if it goes
that.
viral,
And
you
then
can make
remember
another
your girl. I'm not going to do nothing strictly for black people now.
I got to do it to him, Shabaki. He just had to.
Yeah.
Just had to.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because
see, not only is she morally wrong, that is extremely dangerous to our very economical survival. And who's the main ones who are out here homeless? Us. I saw old Tricky up there. What's old Tricky talking about?
I think he's just playing a clip of them speaking. Let me let the video continue, Shabaki. It's about 5 to 8 more minutes of this video.
Okay.
Before you know it, you're a voice, and that's exciting. And I think that can be good for civic life up to a point, right? With the caveats you earlier said. But I observe less of that, not none, but less of that in writing.
I think that it is not as easy of an era of entry. The difference between the newsletter world and the blogosphere is the blogosphere was an ecosystem that was built on the currency of links back and forth.
Yeah.
So you came up when I started blogging, what I wanted in life was a link from Kevin Drum, from Andrew Sullivan, from Matthew Iglesias. And if I started getting those and we started arguing back and forth, then I'd get some readers. And I mean, over time, as I got bigger, they'd get some readers. But there was a nature of it, a discourse, a dialogue that was happening that was itself cross-promotional.
Yeah.
It created an ecosystem. What's happening now, the upside of Substack, of the newsletters, is you can monetize yourself as a single voice. That was very hard to do back then.
Sure.
The downside is there isn't an ecosystem. You know, coming up and getting known gets harder and harder and harder because there isn't that kind of constant ping back and forth. One reason podcasting has taken off the way it has, which I think is actually very underplayed, is podcasting has that same network effect. People are endlessly going on each other's podcasts. Joe Rogan, there's a whole universe of people who've spun out of going on and off the Joe Rogan podcast, the Theo Vaughn podcast, etc.
It's a great point you're making, having lived through some of it, because those network effects are powerful, particularly when they're driven by some level of authority. So it's not that you have to agree with something, but if 3 writers you respect say it's worth a read, that means something. And the personalized algorithm model doesn't give you that. What it gives you is all of the sugar of whatever you might enjoy and find entertaining, but it's algorithmically driven. It's not driven, as you're saying, by that type of editing. We started with, hey, I feel like I'm very close to a Yochai Benkler network effect analysis here, and drop a like in the YouTube comments if you want to respond to that. Before I let you out of here, we made something that relates to all this back on the political side, but it relates to the intersection of media discourse and politics. So we have a great team, I can say, of researchers and producers who built this, going back to the first televised debates and how long politicians spoke and what the expectation of the audience was, attention, something you've written about, our colleague Chris Hayes has written about, and how that's shifted over time. So this is a little longer because things used to take longer. Take a look.
We discussed tonight domestic issues, but I would not want that to be any implication to be given that this does not involve directly our struggle with Mr. Khrushchev for survival. Mr. Khrushchev is in New York, and he maintains the communist offensive throughout the world because of the productive power of the Soviet Union itself.
The things that Senator Kennedy has said, there is no question but that we cannot discuss our internal affairs in the United States without recognizing that they have a tremendous bearing on our international position. There is no question but that this nation cannot stand still.
Taxes have been cut, and yet income is up to the federal government by 25% in the last 3 years. And so what I want to do is keep this expansion going.
You mentioned the Navy, for example, and we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military has changed.
You defrauded the challenge on a point. You can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. You can't. When that mob came, Senator Cruz was hiding in a supply closet.
Has the discourse changed? Is it for the worse? Is it irreversible?
So you're going to a Yale Hancock point, but you're actually going to a Marshall McLuhan, Walter Ong point. The medium is a message. And the point of the medium is a message, and the point of Ong's work earlier about oral culture is that every medium we are in begins to change us. We think it's about the content, right? What matters is which tweet you're looking at, which YouTube video you're watching. But actually what matters is it becomes our expectations for the content, the way we form ourselves around the content. I mean, the thing you can't show there because it's not video, but my God, you go back and you read the Lincoln Douglas debates, these huge things where people are coming out to watch people speak for an hour and a half at a time, and they're wrapped because their minds had evolved, had designed themselves to be used to that kind of entertainment, that kind of storytelling, right? We memorize things differently. These are huge changes. We then move into, over time, radio. We move from oral culture into literacy culture. We have radio, we have television. I always think that videos from the JFK Nixon debate are interesting because I never think Nixon looks as bad as the stories of that debate say he does. He sort of looked okay there.
He looks like an FBI agent.
He looks like an FBI agent.
You can see the appeal to some.
And then over time we have the internet, cable news, right? Every one of these changes us. It doesn't just change politics. It doesn't just change how people talk. Barack Obama is perfectly capable of going on at length, and so are many, many Republicans today. What is hard is the expectations of the audience, and particularly as you move into things like social media, quick video, TikTok. What I really worry about is the untraining of our attention. There was a fascinating piece in the Financial Times recently that had titles something like, "Have we passed peak human intelligence?" And what it was showing was that across a bunch of different measures.
I'll let you finish, but I'm going to go with yes.
Well, we'll see about the peak, right? There's a future. But you look at a bunch of different measures of literacy, of test scores, these are global things. And they're starting to go down after very, very, very long periods of going up. And now we get AI. And what I worry about with AI, I mean, one of many things I worry about with AI, is that it automates away from us and lures us into automating away from us the exact parts of intellectual work that make us smarter, the writing of the first draft. You get a lot smarter doing the hard work on the blank page than editing some slop or even something good that the AI did, right? No AI could tell me how often when I was writing a chapter in this book, the problem was I was writing the whole thing wrong, or I had to go back to the beginning and do more reporting and more research. And AIs, the other thing they're good at is summarizing things. I said earlier that I think a lot of my career is built on, I don't just read the summary. I read the thing. I read as a podcast host the full book. I used to read and still do read the Congressional Budget Office report. You learn things doing the full. But we have an AI. We have a set of tools coming on. The thing they are tuned to do is write the first draft and summarize it for us. And that's exactly taken away the parts that tend to make us smarter, wiser, force us to do actual intellectual struggle. So yeah, what McLuhan would say, what Ong would say, is these mediums are going to change us. And when you combine that with TikTok and all the rest of it, how our attention spans are getting shorter, we, I think, as a nation are getting twitchier. Donald Trump is like a golem summoned from this age of attention. I don't think it, foretells anything good. Now, cultures change, right? There's often a reaction to whatever you're in now. So I'm not going to predict where we are 10 years from now. But if we kept on this trend line, right? If we just went straight from here,
linear,
I don't think it would look good.
Right, and you see that in the arts, whether it's the depiction of AI and her breaking down what has been tens of thousands of years of meaningful human relationships, right?
Oh my God! I got young kids, man. I am so worried.
Right,
about the
or the political one is Idiocracy, which of course is it's deliberately a mockery. But what you just said about the medium and things going down to the smallest, shortest possible, simplest entertainment is what you see in Idiocracy, luring a society of affluence into its own blather. I give you the final word in our interview.
I'll say, to bring it back to my book, because I should do that one of the things this book is about is that to have a coherent politics, you need to have a coherent vision of the future. You need to actually work backwards from the kind of future you want to have. We talk in the book a lot about things like energy and housing and infrastructure and technological innovation, because a lot of human progress comes from different technologies making previously unsolvable problems tractable or previously unimaginable possibilities real. But there's also a question of what kind of people we want to be in the future, right? There's also a question of what kind of country. The moral level of this is not insignificant. The question of what is human flourishing is not insignificant. And one of the things that I genuinely believe about politics is that there is a hunger, and has been for some time, for candidates who can talk to that level of who we are. In a strange way, Donald Trump, he does it not in the way I want, but towards a certain form of old school Spartan bravery, courage, masculine aggression. There's always been a resonance of this in human culture. I think there's the possibility for something a little more humane, a little more humanistic than that. But one place where I think that I maybe defy the type people have of me is I'm not a technocrat about this. Right. I think we actually have lost a more humanistic vision of what our politics should actually ultimately be about, what the whole platform of abundance, what the whole platform of liberalism is trying to make possible in human beings' lives.
Ezra Klein, the book is Abundance. Thanks.
All right, Shabaka, what are your thoughts on what this dude just said?
Okay, AI is dangerous, okay, it's because it cannot be controlled. Okay, this individual here, it's quite obvious, he has no connection with the Black community or the African diaspora whatsoever. Is because, as we know, is that racist white supremacy, has its own foundations. They also too have their own agenda that they're trying to push.
You know what I'm
saying? Yeah, they say.
Video. Cruz in the building says B1 YouTube playing with notifications, hiding video history.
Yeah, exactly. Look where it's at. You see what I'm saying? It's right there in San Mateo County. Look where it's at. Of course, they're playing games with it. You see? Of course, they're playing games with it.
So now we're going to kind of switch gears, but not really, into Elon Musk, the Musty Man. Colonial history or neo-colonialism and apartheid, neo-Nazi involvement and ties to such. So shout out to Democracy Now! For this. They're going to give us an update on the Musty Man and where he sent.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show with part 2 of my recent interview with the reporter Chris McGreal, who was the Johannesburg correspondent for The Guardian during the last years of apartheid through 2002. He's been closely following the South African-born billionaire Elon Musk, who was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, South Africa, and raised under the country's racist apartheid laws. Some of McGreal's pieces include what does Elon Musk believe and how the roots of the PayPal mafia extend to apartheid South Africa, Africa. I began by asking Chris McGreal to discuss Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman.
We see Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman. He immigrates to South Africa in 1950, and that's really when apartheid's just started to kick in. The 1950s are when the first laws, South Africa had discriminatory laws before, but you see the specific apartheid laws, which are much more aggressive, and in many ways reminiscent of the Nazi Nuremberg laws against Jews in the 1930s. They have very similar echoes in stripping black people from the right to work in certain places, their movements, controlling them, confining them to areas. You already had a situation which is now,
No, this is a cracker that literally said.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, when the Boers came there, you see, and then they had put down the Zulu nation, and the Boers are the Dutch. And then, of course, they came in with lies, deceit, divide and conquer. You see?
Yep. So let's go into it, Shabaka. How much lies, deceit, and deception did they bring?
Come to the fore because of recent events with Trump, but
you mean with Elon Musk giving the Nazi salute?
Yes, but also with the
same one that kept telling us it wasn't a Nazi salute, going goddamn well that's a goddamn Nazi salute.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You see, now they're insulting people's intelligence. You see what I'm saying? And I do know the word is intelligence. You see?
Yep. You didn't see what you're seeing, just like 9/11. You didn't see what you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't exist. It didn't happen.
Like, remember the Men in Black when they had the damn, I forgot what it was called, but it would wipe your memory clean.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And delete all your history, delete your very existence. Yeah, where they would have that thing there, to switch to wipe your memory clean.
Yeah.
Sanctions over land is that the 1913 Land Act had already deprived most black people of land in South Africa anyway. At that point, the 7% or 10% as it was of the population that was white owned more than 85% of the land under the...
That's crazy. How the hell does 10% of the population own 85% of the land? And then you look at the United States and it's very similar.
Yeah, well, you see, they came in there with their brutal military. You see what I mean? They came in with their brutal
Land Act
military.
of 1913. So the apartheid laws kick in the 1950s.
Keep in mind, and freeze that there for one second, brother. We got to put this fact out. Is that Gandhi had started his thing around 1915 in South Africa. Gandhi wasn't speaking up for black people there in South Africa. He was only worried about Indians. You see what I mean?
The Brahmins. He wasn't even worried about the Dravidians or the Dalits. He was worried about the Brahmins.
Yeah, exactly. And then he referred to us as Kafirs, which is like calling us niggas in the United States. We had no knowledge of anything. You see what I mean? And then they want us to sit up there and worship Gandhi. Now, Dr. King, bless his heart, patronized himself after Gandhi, but I honestly believe had Dr. King would have done more in-depth research on Gandhi, he would have turned his back on Gandhi as well, too. He would have had no choice.
Yeah,
Elon Musk was born in...
He patterned himself after his non-violent movement.
Exactly.
But that non-violent movement wasn't to benefit us like you just outlined.
Yeah, exactly.
In 1971 in Johannesburg, and at that point the prime minister was a guy called John Vorster, and John Vorster's background is very telling, really, because Vorster in the 1930s had been a member of a neo-Nazi militia called the OB, which was openly sympathetic and linked to the Nazis in Germany. It was responsible for all kinds of attacks, but including burning Jews out of their businesses in Johannesburg.
And we're talking about what years?
In the 1930s, so the late 1930s. And then South Africa goes to war as an ally of Britain against Hitler. The OB and the groups that support them, like Forster, people like Forster, they actively oppose that. They actually are in touch with, OB is in touch with German military intelligence, and they plan to assassinate the Prime Minister of South Africa, Jan Smuts, and overthrow the government and have it support Hitler.
Do you remember Smuts?
Yeah, I remember Smuts, and then keep in mind too is that Namibia is very close to South Africa. And you remember the Berlin Conference of 1884, where the Europeans, had divided up the whole continent of Africa for themselves. Yeah, exactly. You see what I mean? They're setting up the borders, and then just like how we read about Rene Chirac, okay, and they went through great length, just like what the counterintelligence program did in the United States, to keep black folks divided. You see what I mean? And then they got the audacity to sit up there and say that we're filthy and nasty and that we're savages and what have you, just like they did to the indigenous people here on the continent of North America. The white boy comes, first thing he does is give them blankets with smallpox in it. They say, and in one generation, he had domesticized the indigenous people of America, is referred to them as, into Eurocentric culture. You see?
Yeah, like Pocahontas.
Yeah, exactly. You see, worried about John Smith, the white man. And they call this bullshit progress. And then, of course, when we speak out against, you guys are a bunch of black racist guys, and look what they do to us. They tread on our First Amendment rights, the right to free speech. They flag us, tear us down. But when we go up here and look at the crap, that these white folks are saying against black folks, and you got all these Karens and Beckys out there, you see what I mean? We're just supposed to stand there and go for it.
Nah. It's a new day on this plantation. All right, let me continue.
Yeah, exactly.
That plan fails because the Germans are unable to provide the necessary weapons and back out. But in 1942, John Forster, later Prime Minister, stands up and gives a speech, and he talks about the system that their kind of ideological belief system, which was Christian nationalism. And he says, Christian nationalism in South Africa is the same as Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy. It's all anti-democratic. It's all the same thing. By 1971, when Elon Musk is born, that man is the Prime Minister of South Africa.
Wow. So Elon Musk is the same age as my mom. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So he was 1971.
So he's only 54 years old.
Elon Musk. Yep. And he got like 13 kids. 13 kids.
Yeah, but he ain't worried about child
Christian
support,
nationalism is the basis of not only.
What did you say, Shabaka? I missed it.
Okay, and I know he's not behind in his child support. You know what I'm saying?
Not being a billionaire, you would.
Yeah, you see. So quite natural, of course, that Musk is going to spread the same contamination to his offspring. You see what I mean?
But let's get into his upbringing.
Yep.
The political philosophy, but the entire education system that Elon Musk is brought up into.
So take us from Elon Musk's grandfather moving to South Africa in the 50s to his father, how they gained their wealth.
So Elon Musk's grandfather moves there in the 1950s. He's not particularly prosperous. He arrives without a lot of money, but it's Elon.
Did he say Adolf Musk?
Yeah.
Did I hear that correctly?
I think so.
So that explains the Nazi salute.
Yeah, exactly.
At the inauguration.
And keep in mind, they needed all those raw materials from South Africa to build, armaments. You see, they needed the diamonds, you know what I mean, to make money off of that.
Well, they're going to get into all of that, Shabaka.
Elon Musk's father, Errol, who makes the real money, principally through investments in emerald mines in Zambia. And, mining conditions in southern Africa in that period were really pretty dire in the 1960s and 70s. Very high death rate, very poor conditions. But the owners got very rich. And Musk lived what can only be described as a neo-colonial life. If you were white South African in that period and you had any money at all, you lived with servants at your beck and call. You lived in sprawling housing. And what you see with Elon Musk is that when we get a glimpse into just how much money he had when he and Elon's mother get divorced, she says at the time that, well, he owns a yacht, he owns a jet, he owns several houses. So there was considerable wealth there.
Was the grandfather of Elon Musk on the record in his support for Foster?
Well, he was certainly on the record in his support for apartheid, very vividly so, yes. And he said that that's why he'd moved to South Africa from Canada in 1940 was in support of it. Now, the grandfather himself is killed a few years later.
See, Shabaka moved from Canada, so he's definitely not an African.
Yeah, no, he's not. No, he's not. He's a European.
In a plane crash, but is not known what Elon Musk's grandmother's personal views of Forster particularly were, but they were both avid supporters of the apartheid system, and the grandmother lived for a number of years afterwards.
So you've been talking about Elon Musk's maternal grandparents and how they moved to South Africa, but talk about their roots in Canada.
Originally, the grandparents have no connection to South Africa. They're born and grew up in Canada. And in the 1930s, the grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he's head of the Canadian branch of a US movement called Technocracy Incorporated. And Technocracy Incorporated is essentially a movement to overthrow democratic government in the United States and have technocrats, but big businessmen in many ways, come in and run the country. That's partly a reaction to FDR's election and New Deal and massive reforms that he's introduced in the United States.
So from Canada, they would help to launch a coup against FDR?
No, Canada had its own branch of this movement to overthrow the government in Canada. Haldeman heads that branch. And through the 1930s, it takes on increasingly fascist overtones. They start wearing grey uniforms, modeled on the Nazi brown and black shirts. And so when Canada declares war on Germany in 1939 alongside Britain, the movement is banned because it's clearly sympathetic to Hitler. Then Haldeman is arrested.
Elon Musk's grandfather.
Elon Musk's grandfather is arrested. They find documents sympathetic to the Nazis and other subversive documents inside his house. And he is sent to prison for a few months and then remains on essentially a subversion watch list for the rest of the war. Yeah, so he's basically regarded as a Nazi sympathizer, a fellow traveler.
And about a decade later, he moves to South Africa. Why?
So after the war, he founds another political movement which has deep anti-Semitic roots and actually promotes the forgery, the protocols of the
Elders of Zion.
Elders of Zion, that's it. But obviously after the war and the Holocaust, there's no real appetite for that in Canada. It's a failing political movement. And so his eye casts down to South Africa. By 1950, the apartheid government has been in power for 2 years. And Haldeman looks at it and thinks that's just my kind of place, which clearly that was what he would want to create in Canada and have been trying to create in the 1930s. And so that's the point at which he and his wife, May, they move to South Africa and become very fervent supporters of apartheid.
Now, I wanted to blend in some breaking news in addition to cutting off all aid to South Africa, news of the region, and that is Sam Nujoma, the freedom fighter turned president who led Namibia to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990 has died at the
Remember you were talking about Namibia earlier, Shabaka? Shabaka?
Yeah, I'm here.
age of 95, often referred to as Namibia's founding father, known for his motto, a united people striving to achieve a common good for all members of the society will always emerge victorious.
Why is it us that's always talk about all peoples, though?
Okay, because he's on the puppet strings. He's on the puppet strings. You say he's on the puppet strings. You see what I mean?
He was the neo-colonialist.
Yeah, exactly. You see, because as you know, you got colonialism and then you got neo-colonialism, which is on the puppet strings of the colonialists. Why do you think they knocked off Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso? Because he wasn't going for that.
And Steve
He wasn't going for it.
Steve Biko.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then just like, man, I'll never forget the headlines in 1987 that I read on the Los Angeles Times. I was late 20s. Yeah, and it says Thomas Sankara assassinated.
I was born the same year he was assassinated, Shabaka.
Well, you might be his reincarnation, you know what I'm saying? And then on top of it is that Mr. Sankara, he did not live an elaborate lifestyle because he was about the wealth distribution to the people, similar to what Gaddafi was doing in Libya. You see what I mean?
Yeah, we could do a whole show on him. We might have to do that soon.
Yeah, you say, and then on top of it as well, too, is that we try to tell the world that this isn't racism. Black self-sufficiency is not racism. It's about us gaining our economical independence. It's because of all the groups sit out there and benefit off of us, rather directly or indirectly, nationally and internationally. You see, why do you think they want to see black men wearing dresses?
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's sickening. It's sickening. It's sickening. You see, it's sickening.
Used to be called Southwest Africa, became the independent Namibia. Talk about Sam Nujoma and how that fits into this picture of South Africa through apartheid.
So Sam Nujoma was the head of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, which was the liberation movement
SWAPO.
of
I
Namibia.
remember it.
SWAPO, indeed. Really, SWAPO takes off and is able to have effect after Angola becomes independent with the fall of the Portuguese dictatorship. The Portuguese colonizers leave Angola, and Angola provides a base then for SWAPO to really fight to liberate Southwest Africa. That becomes known as the Border War. Euphemistically, the South Africans call it the Border War. They actually invade Angola in an attempt to overthrow the Marxist-leaning government of Angola, but also to keep SWAPO at bay. But the war goes on, and eventually South Africa loses that war. At that period, though, one of the things you see is that Peter Thiel, another member of the PayPal mafia, very close.
Oh yeah, I want to get on that PayPal mafia. But is it true so far what this cracker is saying?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Friend of Musk. He had been at school in Johannesburg, but his father gets a job on a uranium mine near Swakopmund in what is then Southwest Africa. And so Peter Thiel moves there as a child and goes to school there. And the thing to know about Southwest Africa, the reason it was separate from South Africa, is that it had been a German colony until the end of the First World War. Then it becomes falls under South Africa's mandate, partly because at that point South Africa was a British colony. When South Africa becomes a republic in the 60s, it hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry. And you could, I remember going to Windhoek in the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goeringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa.
Plot thickens, Shabaka.
So wait a minute. So not only was these Nazis going to Brazil, they were going to Namibia.
Yep. And they said that Namibia was a colony of South Africa, Tanzania.
But it sympathized with the Nazis as well too, because now you just brought up a memory, brother Che. There was a book, that became a movie in the 1970s called The Boys from Brazil. And what it was that Joseph Mengele had an obsession with twins, and he started cloning. And I think The Boys from Brazil was like about 35 different type of Hitlers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do remember
because the Nazis had all fled to South America, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil. You see what I mean? And then, like I argued with that stupid ass Sarge, at the end of World War II, when they dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, why didn't y'all drop the damn thing on Munich and Berlin?
Right.
The plot thickens. Well, it wasn't ready at that time, and all that prepackaged babble ass dumb shit, man. You know what I'm saying? But it's clearly obvious. Why? I spoke with people who were from Japan or Japanese, descendants in Los Angeles, and they had stated is that the reason why they dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and not Berlin and Munich is because those people were not white.
Exactly. And Nagasaki and Hiroshima were black Japanese cities.
At the time of the samurai. And the samurai, from what I understand, is that they were the ruling class of Japan. Like, who was the guy who made the statement that we must bear the unbearable Hirohito? It's because it was unprecedented that you would have that type of destruction. They called it the Manhattan Project. And what happened was,
and to the samurai, they also said you have to have a drop of black blood in you to be considered a samurai.
Well, interesting. That's very, very interesting. All right. And then, of course, too, they had a code of honor amongst themselves. You see what I'm saying? Stinky bird, these Europeans, you know what I'm saying? They don't have no sense of honor. They believe in one thing and one thing only: greed and oppression of people who don't look like them. Well, you're a black racist, Shabaka. Right. Now show me what industries that we control. Show me what banks that we control. Show me what stock markets we control. Show me what police departments that we control, because we are in no economical or political, Mac 285, where is that bastard? And we're in no political economic position to implement any type of racism. Why do you think they keep perpetuating us to kill each other?
Right. Well, he gave us a bogus email, Mac, and we tracked his ass
Mac
down.
285. Yeah. He gave us a bogus email. We tracked the fool down on another show.
Yeah.
So our next move is to get on the other show and get up there with Sarge. And if I get up there with Sarge, I will tell Sarge that he gave us a bogus email because he don't dig this heat.
Yeah, he could have been joining us, but no, he gave us bogus shit.
No, he decided to go over there with Stinky Bird and Trump.
All right, let's continue with Stinky Bird and his involvement with PayPal.
In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a...
So that was Namibia on your screen. That's Namibia.
What
was the original Shabaka? Was Angola.
Yeah. Mutombo was Angola. But keep in mind, though, it's like the Europeans are the ones who came up with the imaginary border. So I would imagine Her Majesty's Empire went from Angola down into this part right here as well, too. You see?
To what is known as Namibia, but it used to be called something else before.
Yeah. So I'd imagine, and keep in mind, Her Majesty was around in the 16th century, you see, on the European calendar. And they go down there talking about that she's a colony of King Philip of Portugal. And she says, "Clown, do you care to repeat that?" And they did. And that's when she put in the work all the way until she passed away, from what I understand, at the age of 85.
So they were saying that this was a colony of South Africa. So South Africa is right here at the bottom of the screen. Xania, its original name. And there's a river. I forgot what the name of this river is, Shabaka. You might remember. But there's a river.
Okay.
Border,
Okay, I'm trying to remember that river.
That separates them. And then you got Botswana to the north, which used to be called something else. I forgot what the original name was. But it was something else before Botswana.
And then you had both of Botswana. Then you had Swaziland. Swaziland at one time had the world's oldest monarch.
Yeah.
Then you
remember Lesotho as well.
Yeah, and then there was and then Emperor Bokassa, I believe, had 55 children.
Yep. Jesus, 55 children. He just breeding children. Oh shit! I gotta go back.
Windhoek was called Hermann Goering Strasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme.
That's what it was. It was German Southwest Africa.
That
was the colonialist name of Namibia.
It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station to get his car filled with gas, and the attendant openly giving a Nazi salute and saying Heil Hitler to him. You could go to curio shops in Swakopmund and they would sell Nazi-themed mugs and flags and things, and they openly celebrated Hitler's birthday every May. Thiel went to a German school there, so that's the atmosphere he grows up in. His father...
Oh shit, his birthday's coming up too, Shabaka. And you know, every time around his birthday time, some shit goes down.
Yeah.
Portraying us being victims of a hate crime or extremist crime.
Yeah.
Is an official on a uranium mine there. And the interesting thing about the uranium mine, amongst many other things, is that it supplied part of the uranium to develop the South African atomic bombs in the 1970s, which were developed in league with Israel. Now,
yeah, a lot of people don't know South Africa had nuclear weapons too.
Yeah, and then too, according to this here, dude said Hitler was born in May. According to this here, Hitler's birthday is April 20th, 1889.
20th, yeah, April 20th, 1929. Yep. He was born in the same year.
1889.
Oh, 100 years, 1889. Wait, 89?
Yeah.
1889. Damn. Hitler was born in 1889? Wow. Okay. So after the Berlin Conference, like 5 years after the Berlin Conference. Wow. Okay. Thank you for that, Shabaka.
Part of the deal with Israel was that South Africa would deliver yellowcake uranium to Israel. We don't know where the yellowcake came from. It may have come from that Swakopmund area mine, or it may have come from somewhere else in South Africa. But South Africa was shipping yellowcake to Israel at the same time because it too was developing nuclear weapons.
And talk about what Peter Thiel has said about all this. You know, I remember as we cover conventions for decades now, Peter Thiel standing up at the first Republican convention that nominated President Trump and, you know, supporting him and who he is.
So Peter Thiel has said of his time in Swakopmund, and particularly the school, which he describes as particularly a brutal education, that it turned him against government and into a libertarian. And I think that's an interesting element in all of this, is that one of the things that isn't necessarily appreciated outside of South Africa is that there's two kinds of whites there. There's the Afrikaners who we've been talking about, but there's a big English-speaking white population. And one of the aspects of the English-speaking...
That's why I was talking about the split between the Boers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Remember I was telling you there's two types of Boers?
Yeah. That you did say, Brother Che.
Population was, they on paper said they opposed apartheid, but they gained all of its benefits. And most of them, certainly not all, there were some really heroic.
So that's like Muggs saying, hey, I'm against Jim Crow, but I don't have no problem with it.
Yeah, I don't have no problem of being able to pay my on the front of the bus, as opposed to so many of our people who pay their money on the bus, had to get off, enter the bus at the rear, and the bus driver would drive.
Yep.
See, individuals, but most of them did very little to actually end apartheid. But one of the products of that is you have people like Musk and Thiel who have done very well and whose parents did very well out of the apartheid system, who deny responsibility for it. They blame it on the Afrikaners, they blame it on a government, extreme right-wing government.
Is that Cape Town, Shabaka?
Okay, Cape Town is on the coast. I believe if it's by the water, that's Cape Town.
Okay.
But
and
then they have to explain how it is that their own parents.
I just want to say out there for our listeners is that Cape Town, okay, is where the white man would stop at the Cape when he was traveling from Europe to go off into the Far East, right? Okay. So they had been in Cape Town like about the 1600s, okay? But that mountain range that you got right there, I believe it's called the Drakensberg Mountains. And I believe I was speaking with a brother from Azania who was giving me this education. And then in the 1820s, the white man went up there to go see Shaka in Natal, okay, which is on the Indian Ocean coast, okay? And I believe that Durban is near around Natal, but correct me if I'm wrong. So therefore, you had the Vortex records.
Natal had been Mozambique, or would Natal have been Tanzania or Kenya?
No, it would be Mozambique, because Tanzania and Kenya are way north of Natal. Okay, now Natal, because as you know, at the bottom, or the Cape as they call it, that this is where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean meet, just like around South America where the Pacific and the Atlantic meet. And what happens is that these two oceans are colliding with the currents. You see what I mean? Okay. So therefore, let's see, it was Farewell. It was a white dude named, it was a white dude named Farewell, who was a British officer, naval officer, and his companion H.W. Flynn. That they go over there, and these were the first white men that Shaka had seen. But before they went out on their mission, they said that we're going to take full advantage of their ignorance. We're going to lie to them by any means necessary, because what we want is the ivory. So they started killing off the elephants. So, of course, they came with lies and deceit. You see what I mean? Telling the people, that they were God and that they was coming as friends, but in actuality, that they were going in there to exploit the land, to dominate the people, because they feared King Shaka. Oh yeah, they did. Now, they made a movie in the 1980s about it, right? Okay. But there was
They have the whole series up on YouTube, Shabaka. I just seen it up recently. It came up in my suggestions.
Yes, sir. Now, keep in mind, there's a key scene that was taken out of that movie, okay, when they showed it to the rest of the world in the United States. There's a scene where Shaka is sitting with the white naval officer, right? And so Shaka says to the white naval officer, "Why are you really here?" You say, "Well, to see to your needs." And Shaka says, "What do you mean to see to our needs? You know, we're self-sufficient." You say. So then Shaka says to the white man, "So are you coming here where you says you want English, Zulu, English, Zulu, English, Zulu, or are you coming here to say English, 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 and no Zulu?" That part they didn't show in the United States.
Yeah, they didn't show that.
So quite obvious. Yeah. Yeah. And then the kicker. Yeah, and then the kicker of the movie in the last episode, pretty much close to the last scene, is where Shaka sends his prime minister and his generals to Cape Town to meet with the British, and they stated that their presence here is an act of war. So then they come back to Natal, where King Shaka was ruling from, you know, his capital, and they tell Shaka's aunt, okay, after Nandi's passing, she became the Queen Mother, and she says is that the whites don't have nothing to offer. Okay, so inadvertently, based on what I've seen, Shaka committed treason unknowing. Okay, it's because there's a scene in the movie where Shaka's mother dies, and he asks the white man to resurrect her. He says, "Resurrect her like your Christ in your Bible was resurrected." The white fella tells Shaka, "Well, he was the King of Kings." Shaka says, "Well, she is the Queen of Queens." You see what I mean? So this is where the hypocrisy collides at. You see what I'm saying? So Shaka was assassinated. His brother took over, ruled for 10 years. He himself was assassinated. And then in the 1870s, I don't know if this was Shaka's great-grandson or his great-nephew, Setwile, who put up the last resistance of what they call the Zulu Wars in the 1870s. And then, of course, the white man that came down there with all his sense of destruction, you see what I'm saying, and eliminated the Zulus. You see what I mean? And one thing you have to understand about the colonialist, the first thing he's going to take away from you is your language and your culture, and then inflict his culture and language on you. That's it. The classic case of that is the American Negro. But we were brought here. You see what I'm saying? And of course we know about Jamestown, and of course we know about the demasculization of the black male, just like the X-Man said, the house Negro says to the field Negro says to the house Negro, "Hey, let's escape. Let's run away. Let's get away from this cruel master." And then what's his nigga Jim Clyburn response? "Man, you must be crazy. What's better than what we got here?" See the correlation between the two?
Yeah, well, you know, we can go with this, Shabaka. But I'm gonna quote it for Frontline Black.
Yeah, but I just wanted to bring up that fact is because, as you very well stated, it's still racist white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. I think I found the interview we're talking about, Shabaka.
Okay, with Sister Miriam Makeba?
No, the interview that wasn't shown in the United States.
Oh, yeah. Pull it up, and then let's get to Sister Miriam as well, too.
Go back to that map. Hey, look how big that continent is, y'all.
It's twice the size of the United States.
Easily. This map makes it even look even bigger than that. No, like this got to be a Peters projection, or it's like one of the original maps of Makeba. So as you can see, like there's no borders, right? Besides the geographical borders, right? So.
Is this sky so beautiful in the land of your King George? Not exactly, Baba. You see stars that we do not see. And we see stars that you do not see. Amazing. Everywhere we look. Down. Up. Our peoples are different. Yet you ask that we come together. Or this nation you speak of, fruit of our alliance, who would govern it? There would be representatives sent out from our king. Together with you would deliberate, make laws, see to the needs of the people. Your people would know the needs of my people. We would learn each other's needs. How would we live in this nation? As neighbors, village near village. And how would these villages be placed? Zulu, English, Zulu, English, Zulu. The land is vast, Baba. There's plenty of room for all.
There it is,
without crowding. Without crowding, Febana, Zulu, English. Until our needs become clear. I see. But what would happen, Febana, if after many generations, the children of your children were still unable to learn the needs of my people? If their stars remained different, would they then leave to go back to the lands where you came from? Or would they have learned to love this land so deeply that no other land could be home? What would happen, Febana, if this land, without crowding, became crowded? Which of those unborn children would then be called African? Yours or mine?
Hey, Jab.
There you are, Shabaka.
Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about. Right there. That right there. That right there. Now, let's check out Sister Miriam Makeba of what she said. And as we know, Ms. Makeba was born in 1932. Okay, she had transitioned, I believe, 2007, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, Shabaka, we got to finish the Elon Musk thing up. And then we got Miriam Makeba. And we'll probably close out.
Okay, and then after that, then we're gonna have to close it out after that on my end. But however, we could have a continuation,
on my end as well, Shabaka, because I have an appointment in a few hours, a dentist appointment.
Oh man, yeah, okay.
Well out of apartheid, and then they put that down to individual talent, that they're naturally gifted, and that leads them down this whole libertarian path, anti-government path, because essentially they have to explain how they too were benefits of apartheid without taking responsibility.
And talk about their relationship, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Well, they're co-founders of PayPal together. They both essentially share the same kind of worldview, from what I can make out. They're, libertarians. They're very opposed to any kind of DEI. You've seen their deep hostility to DEI. I think Thiel buys into the same message about anti-white, the war on white people in South Africa that South African white groups like AfriForum have been pushing in the United States. So I think that philosophically they're very similar, and obviously they have a very close relationship.
And then talk about David Sacks and talk more specifically about what you're referring to as the PayPal mafia. I don't think most people in this country understand all of these connections and this unusual situation where these some of the wealthiest men in the world work together, founded PayPal, and now surround the president of the United States.
Yeah, so David Sacks was born in Cape Town in the 70s, and he moves. His parents take him to Tennessee when he's 5 years old, so he didn't grow up in the same milieu as Musk and Thiel, but he did grow up in the white South African diaspora for sure. He clearly shares the same views.
What in the fuck is the white South African diaspora?
Yeah, see, once again, man, that double speak. And then, now hold it. Look at this here, people. He grew up in Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Uh-huh. Remember Arrested Development?
Yep.
Tennessee.
Yep. Shout out to Speech. He has a YouTube channel too, by the way, Shabaka.
Okay. You see? So this is what I'm saying, people, that I've been saying all along over the course of my lifetime of what I've witnessed. Okay. So they leave Azania, strike that. They leave Azania, but then they go to Tennessee.
Yep.
Connect the dots. Now you tell me. Yeah, I'm stupid. I don't know nothing. I just been on this planet over 60 years. I don't know shit, man. You know what I'm saying? Help erase my ignorance, people. And I'm being sarcastic. But do your own research. You see what I mean? And then when I see stuff like this here, this is why I'm so steadfast. Y'all see this?
You hear a white South African diaspora. I've been hearing a lot of diaspora talk from other groups that's not African.
Okay. That just goes to show, Brother Che, that we are getting somewhere.
As you say, they're part of the PayPal mafia. They all get rich from the creation of this company. They're all at the top running it. And now Sacks has emerged as Trump's AI and crypto czar. Again, part of the same project. So you can see this. And
he was a chief fundraiser for President Trump, as you said, born in Cape Town.
Yes, a big. So they've all emerged with essentially, from what I can make out, the same philosophy. And of course, that's only been reinforced by their success.
What philosophy is that, Shabaki?
You say it all the time, Brother Jay. Racist, white supremacy. You said
They're convinced, obviously, of their own.
To the head of the class.
Yeah. You said it right.
Genius and worth, and that government, whether it's South African government or in this case it seems to be the US government, is an obstacle to success.
And then we talked about it in part one, finally Roloff Botha making this little quartet white men of a certain age together. And his history, also a part of the PayPal mafia.
Yes, he's part of it, and he has not emerged as a open supporter of Trump. I'm not entirely sure what his personal views are on this, but he does have a very interesting background. His grandfather was Pik Botha, who was the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa, and Pik Botha's job essentially was to go around the world, particularly the West, and assure them that apartheid was being amended, was being dismantled, when in fact it was in many ways, although what was known as petty apartheid, which was the routine discriminations, the segregation, was being dismantled. In fact, the political system was actually only reinforcing it, solidifying it. The government of the time cooked up a system of 3 parliaments that would represent different parts of the population, but and give some people who weren't white a vote, but none of those people were black. There was no black parliament, partly because they were being pushed into the independent homelands. The idea was that they were no longer South African anyway. So Pik Botha went around trying to apologize and excuse for this system. And he was successful with conservatives. He saw a lot of Reagan and people, they loved him here, and the same with Thatcher in Britain. They saw them as the acceptable face of apartheid. And he was so deluded by the end, he was convinced. I remember meeting him during the era of the transition to democracy from apartheid. He was so convinced that...
All right, Shabak, if I keep pausing, we're not going to get to the video, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I was just saying is, man, yeah, go ahead, get to the video. Yeah, quit pausing. Okay. Yeah, I quit pause.
He was indispensable to the system that Mandela would have to appoint him foreign minister, which he duly did not.
Would you say the background of all these men's families was fleeing Mandela's South Africa?
Well, some of them left before. I mean, it's worth noting that Elon Musk left in 1988 at the age of 18, just as he would have become eligible to be drafted into the South African army, as all white males were at that point, which might have led him to fight the border war that I was talking about in Angola against SWAPO, or it might have led him into the townships, which at that point were in complete ferment. And, you had a huge amount of civil unrest in South Africa at that point. The country had largely become ungovernable. It was under a state of emergency, and the white troops were trying to keep some form of order in the black townships like Soweto. He left before he had to do any of that.
So very interestingly, for people who aren't aware, Elon Musk had a company called X.com. It was an online bank. It merged with Confinity in 2000 to form PayPal. The merged company was renamed PayPal in 2001. And you have all of these guys who you've just laid out. Well, I think Botha is a partner at Sequoia Capital, but now key players. And that brings us to Trump's order on Friday to cut off all aid to South Africa and offer refugee status in the United States to the white South Africans who are, quote, victims of unjust racial discrimination. But interestingly, many in the right-wing white lobby say they want to stay and focus on ending black majority rule. This is Flip Bass, the chairperson of what's called the Solidarity Union.
We might disagree with the ANC, but we love the country. As in any community, there are individuals who wish to immigrate, but the repatriation of Afrikaners as refugees is not a solution for us. We want to build a future in South Africa.
So he is speaking in front of a sign that says AfriForum. Put this in context. And what about Afrikaners saying, no, this is our land. We don't want to come to the United States.
Well, AfriForum is backpedaling furiously now because there's been a huge backlash in South Africa from people who blame it for this situation. In fact, some people have accused it of treason. But if you look at what AfriForum was saying just a decade ago, and certainly in 2018, when people like Kali Kriel, who was head of the AfriForum, and others were coming to the United States, they were claiming there was a white genocide. They were claiming there was a war on white people in South Africa, and they were essentially trying to characterize the post-apartheid era of one of oppression of Afrikaners, that they were the true victims of it. And this is they're not alone in this. There had been a phenomenon ever since the end of apartheid of Afrikaners painting themselves as victims. There was a song emerged in the 1990s called De La Rey. It was very popular with Afrikaners. It was sung in bars and rugby matches. And De La Rey was a famous general who fought to the bitter end against the British in the Boer War, the Second Boer War, in the early 20th century, which the Afrikaners then lost. And this song essentially is an attempt to take Afrikaners back to a time when they were the victims, when it was their women and children dying in the British concentration camp, when they were the people who were oppressed. And it conjures up this Boer general who, he may be losing the war, but he's going to fight to the last, a bitter ender. And this is how they've been characterizing themselves, some of them. And AfriForum is part of that kind of attempt to rewrite history and make out that they're this minority that has long been persecuted, not just by the post-apartheid era, but by the British, and they have a long history. And apartheid was just a means of survival. All they were trying to do was to keep themselves and their culture alive. It has had one other effect, which they hadn't expected and has alarmed them, is that in all the orders that have been given out,
Exactly, Shabaka. We see the same shit going on over here with slavery and their involvement with slavery and their justification for it.
Right.
He's trying to say it was for self-preservation. No, it was for them to rob, pillage, and steal whatever the hell they could.
And what's the words of Frogface? Segregation yesterday, segregation today, and segregation tomorrow.
Yeah.
See,
remember the Nazis. Remember, Shabaka, the Nazis learned from the Jim Crow South on how to do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They learned from the segregationists of the Jim Crow South of what they did to the Jewish people in Europe. You see.
And what they did
you
to
see,
Black South Africans.
Yeah. You see.
Cancelling aid and agreements. One of them affects agricultural products being imported to the United States, which have generally been duty-free as a means of helping Africa. One result is that their own products are no longer being imported duty-free into the United States. So these white South African farmers who've been complaining of oppression will now actually be being hit with tariffs or regular duties. And so it's going to cost them financially, which is one of the reasons they're so upset by it and pretending that it was nothing to do with them.
Guardian.
Oh, so actually dumping,
And
that's
then,
doing a good thing.
Okay, now keep in mind that in Zimbabwe, President Robert Mugabe, okay, in the 1990s, where they wanted to have a book fair there in Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe. So what had happened was the alternative agenda said they want to come there and have their parade and pride and stuff like that. And Mr. Mugabe said, no, we don't do that here. So take your book fair, go to London, go to New York, and I think he said, better yet, go to San Francisco. But you're not going to have that here. You see?
Right. Yeah, he sure did. And that's why they put sanctions on him for what, 20 years?
Yeah, all the way up until his death, because Mr. Mugabe passed away in 95. So he lived a full life. You see what I mean? But however, the powers that be, yeah. So once again, when you look at the Marvel comics of Wakanda, okay, you see what I mean? And then I did find out from a reliable source that they are in pre-production of Black Panther 3.
Oh shit.
Okay.
All right, I don't know how to take that as good news or bad news or.
Well, I'm kind of neutral on it. And the reason why I'm neutral on it is because, once again, we don't control the narrative, okay? It's because it's owned by Disney. And then, of course, Ryan Coogler, who was the brother that brought you the independent film of Fruitvale Station. That's how he got the job to direct the first two Black Panthers. You see what I mean? And then also, too, I heard from another reliable source is that they're going to try to turn it into a cable television series as well, too.
Oh my God! So they just milking the hell out of it. They gonna try to. Okay.
Yeah, but once again, we don't control our own resources. That's the problem.
The moment that you've been waiting for is about here. And then we're going to close up with Professor. It's Miriam Makeba.
Yeah, Mama Africa.
Invaders to write the truth about Exania. So there you have it, Black family. That was the history of Elon Musk, the musty man, where he comes from and where his ties are.
And what he's about.
Welcome to the African Leadership Series, where we bring you great inspirational speeches from African leaders.
It is known that Africa only had Black people. Europe had white people. Asia had yellow people. Now, it is absurd to say that we Africans were not in Africa when white people first came. And secondly, the conqueror writes history. They came, they conquered, and they wrote. Now, you don't expect people who came to invade us to write the truth about us. They will always write negative things about us. And they have to do that because they have to justify their invasion in all the countries. It's like saying when the Europeans went to America, there were no Indians there. It's ridiculous because they were there. I know that my people were there. We don't write our history. It has always been handed down to us orally by our elders. Of course, the white man came and he writes history. In fact, you don't know anything about any place until the white man gets there. Like my husband always says, it's like saying, well, until the white man comes to any place, nothing lives. It's only when he comes and say, boof, I've discovered you, now you exist, which is ridiculous. There is really no difference in the struggle between the people you have mentioned, because we are all Africans. We were just put in different countries by white people who took the people from Africa and spread them out. And it is true that our problems are the same. Now, saying that they are a minority, this really means nothing, because the white man, wherever he is, whether he is in the majority or the minority, he rules. It just shows you, it just proves to everyone that we just have to keep fighting. We just have to fight that much more, because it doesn't matter whether he's majority or minority, he's always on top. I think if you're Black, you have difficulties everywhere there are white people. And most white people always say that we should not generalize and so on and so forth. And in fact, there are some countries, even take Sweden. In Sweden, people say there's no racial problem there. But it is only because there are not that many Black people in Sweden, so you don't really see it as clearly as you see it in countries like United States or even South Africa. But there is prejudice everywhere. For instance, in Sweden, we were performing there, and my guitarist, who isn't really white, he is Brazilian, and he looks white because he's an albino. But some people approached him on 4 occasions and told him, why does he have to play with us? And this was in Sweden, where people really often say they have no problem. And his country, Brazil, we were there last June, and white people in Brazil denied the fact that there were racial problems in Brazil. But it exists. We saw it every day. Everywhere I performed in Brazil, I never saw black people. I only performed to white people. And they said, well, it's because they can't afford to come here. It's too expensive, which is another form. I mean, that is another form of keeping them from coming to where they can enjoy themselves together with white people. They keep them poor.
Well, I always feel that even though one is an artist, that we are first human beings and we live in the same world as any other person, so that we as artists should never close our eyes to what is happening around us. Therefore, coming from South Africa, naturally, my life was affected by my environment there. And the songs that I sing are just about my everyday life. And the things I say are those things that have affected my life. The message I'm trying to give to my audience is not one. I am just trying to make them understand me as a person and understand my country and my people. And that is why I have to say the things I say in my performances, because I know, again, that I am right. And because I am right, I know I will win, because the truth shall never be covered by lie.
If you like informative and educational videos.
Yes, shout out to Miriam Makeba. I almost forgot about that speech, Shabaki.
That's what I've been saying, man, for the last 7 years, man. Sarge needs to look at that speech.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Shabaka. We're going to close it out with Professor Black Truth. And he's going to tell us why we need to practice black-owned black business.
Mm-hmm. And not only domestically, internationally.
Yeah. But we got to get on code for that international to get.
I know. It's an uphill battle, Brother Check. You see what I'm saying? And like I say, this is why I try to relate to the generations after me of what I've lived through, just like what Sister did right here. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And that speech, she did that speech in the 1970s?
No, sir. That's in the early 1960s she did that speech.
Wow, in the early 1960s. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and what your indicator is of it being in the early 1960s, that is filmed in black and white, you say. And then one thing about her, when they did the Graceland tour with Paul Simon, she did give Paul Simon, you know, his props, you know, to performing over there. And then there was a group there that he performed with called Ladysmith Black Mambazo. And Ladysmith is the name of a town in Azania.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that history lesson, Shabaka. We're going to move on.
And keep in mind, and this is why, if you notice in our music, okay, which is pretty much have its roots, you know, on the continent, you see what I'm saying? And then when we were brought here, you know, to the United States, and the nightstick and the whip glide gracefully upside our heads. That's why he had a group called the Last Poets, who was the first rappers in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Family and fellow soldier.
They sure were. And shout out to Gil Scott Heron as well.
Him too. He was part of the same era.
Mm-hmm.
And then not to mention James Brown, hold it, not to mention That great hit of 1968 by James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Not to mention that great hit by Aretha Franklin, okay, called Respect. Not to mention that song by Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. Keep on pushing with a little bit of soul. Boom, 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 boom. And this is why you had a cat. The original Black Panther, if you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
And if you ever get a chance, Black family, and if you ever go to the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area, please visit the Infirmary Park on the corner of 16th and Adeline.
Yes.
I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. I think it's safe to say the theme for this week's briefings will be Black people and business. Speaking of which, the number of Black businesses in America has gone up the last 7 years, believe it or not. When the Orange Man took office in 2017, the number of Black-owned U.S. firms was 124,000. By 2022, the middle of the Biden years, that number had risen to 194,585. The Black-owned firms' gross revenue soared by 66% during this time span, from an estimated $127.9 billion to $211 billion. Now, of course, this number only reflects firms. It certainly doesn't reflect the small businesses, the ones that are not necessarily registered with their city, state, etc. And while it's good that this number has gone up, it says a lot about how much we've been oppressed, that even this dramatic rise in Black businesses over the course of only a few years, which would easily make any other group the dominant economy, in our case, it still has us in the low single digits, lower than everyone else compared to our percentage of the population. That number is way too low. This is where these lawsuits from these white supremacist mouthpieces come in. They know that the white dominance in finance and business is artificial. They openly discriminate against Black people. The only good thing that the Biden administration did was to highlight the enormous amount of redlining that has been taking place in the modern day. Not in the 1950s or 60s, but today. That's the one good thing I think came out of that 4 years. It's been documented now. So with lenders blatantly refusing to lend to qualified Black customers, you've had initiatives to aggregate money for Black businesses instead. And then you have the white right sending in their paid operatives to file lawsuits saying that Black businesses have to give the money to white people. Again, Democrats should be the main ones leading the charge against this. You cannot bridge the racial wealth gap by waiting for white businesses to do it. There's been laws against lending discrimination since the 19th century, and they're just ignoring these laws because they know that there's no punishment for it. So there must be targeted economic programs specifically for the people who have been systematically locked out, because none of these primary lending institutions, which are white-owned and white-run, has been trying to lock white people out. Quite the opposite. White people are the ones who they actually lend to. When you've had deliberate targeted racial discrimination, you require targeted racial reparations. This is a fact that in the past, even open bigots like Lyndon Johnson and others were forced to give lip service to. But obviously, Democrats in the last 35 years in particular have been colluding with the Republicans on a strategy of trying to close the book on that stuff, because there's been too much progress made. Even though it was only a couple of inches, for white supremacy, as delicate and fragile as it is, even that was too much. Black people are 13% of the population, but only 3% of U.S. firms. Meanwhile, you have other groups who are a greater percentage of firms than their own population numbers. You only get those kind of lopsided figures when someone has put their thumb on the scales. This is engineered inequality. This is why it's so important that we call out lies such as the one about immigrants who claim that they came to the U.S. with nothing but pocket lint and they managed to get over. In reality, what they got were all kinds of governmental benefits from day one. They get access to loans and credit because they're immigrants, and also because they're not Black. White supremacy knows the rules of racism, it invented them, and that it's always been able to leverage immigrants, even Black ones in a number of cases, to toe the line against us and maintain the racial pecking order. These numbers that you're looking at are not the result of hard work, dent in industry, nor is it the result of ingenuity or innovation. Absolutely no one has innovated more than foundational Black Americans have, and that's a fact. It's part of the reason why every time we look up, we see all this rampant culture vulturing. Most of these people from these other groups are given ready access to governmental contracts, which is guaranteed income. and they use that to pay politicians to give them more contracts, which results in more money for them, and so on and so forth. A vicious cycle. You know, there's an old saying that when you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he had some help getting there. All right, that's at least part of the problem. So what might be the solution? First thing that we can do is to stop hemorrhaging money. When somebody is bleeding out, the very first thing you do is to tie some tourniquets to keep their blood inside their body. Money is the lifeblood of all economic vitality. But in our case, that money leaves the black body politic the instant we get it. That's the first thing that needs to change, this economic hemorrhaging. Too many black people have made a habit out of making excuses for not exercising economic discipline. It's up to those of us with our heads on to start exercising a zero tolerance policy for that. And I'm sure there will be the usual shills and plants and a number of non-black trolls in the comments who pretend to be black, who will be saying, well, black people are never going to get it together. Black people are never going to stop doing this kind of self-defeating behavior, so you need to stop bringing it up, Professor Truth. Let me tell you something stupid. Over here in the land of black empowerment, we don't do defeatism. The entire reason that I started off with those stats is to show that we can get things done if we understand that we have to rely on each other. Because in my opinion, I don't think that it's a coincidence at all that this jump in the number of black U.S. firms happened during the pandemic. What happened was you had a lot of black folks who found themselves economically with their backs to the wall. And during the pandemic, a lot of black folks fought their way out of that corner. There were those who said that we would never discipline our vote. And we've shown that we've begun to do it. And the same goes for our dollars, too. We already know these anti-black racists hate black empowerment because for most of them, they've been able to rely on ignorant black people as customers. So when we talk about disciplining our dollars, these anti-black racists understand that a lot of them are going to go out of business. But there's a lot of black people who also fear black empowerment, too. Because power requires that you grow up, and too many of us want to remain children under white mommy and white daddy, even when the only thing we've gotten from them is abuse. Some black folks simply cannot envision a life without living under white supremacy. Well, let me tell you something. White supremacy will not last, even if subconsciously you hope it does. It's going to fall. I'm not telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know. Now, when white supremacy falls, how are you going to eat? White mommy and white daddy aren't going to feed you. They won't even be able to feed themselves. When white supremacy finally goes out of business, you need to already have the mindset and the resources to make sure that you don't. There was a time when black folks understood that principle. The black Wall Streets weren't built by us sitting around looking for approval or customers hither, thither, and yon. It was built by keeping the dollars in the community. And that was the only time that we had actual prosperity and our economics in order. Our problem was that after white power ransacked our communities, we took our eyes off the bag and started chasing social approval and acceptance from the dominant society instead. Well, you can't pay your bills with colorblind chatter or a pat on the head from Fred or interracial sexual access. You need money. And we know that makes people from the dominant society uncomfortable when we talk about money, because when we do that, we're talking about who's going to be in control. Because the people who are poor are also a people who are weak. And white supremacy understands that its survival depends on keeping us in a weakened position. White power understands the need to look 20 and 50 years down the road, to examine the circumstances of today and extrapolate how events could develop decades from now. And then if you see any sort of challenges or troubles on the horizon, go ahead and try to head them off today. That's why as soon as they see you even murmuring about money, they go on high alert. And when these anti-black racists start to get agitated, well, that scares a lot of black people. You know what the most pathetic part of this fear is? We've shown time and time again that when we stick together, they can't stop us. Not long term, they can't. It's no exaggeration to say that the only ones powerful enough to defeat us is us. Sadly, though, in too many cases, that's exactly what our economic activity has been, self-defeating. Dr. Claude Anderson talks constantly about inappropriate behavior. We keep letting people practice economic and political colonization of us. We've all seen people who are not from our community who move around from place to place trying to run for political office in our neighborhoods, not for the sake of empowering us, but to try to get themselves a leg up on the political ladder. I know you've seen this too. People who never have anything to do with us at all, who in many cases attack us, who routinely kill black children in their stores. And yet when you look up, here they are trying to figure out if there's any Negroes dumb enough who are going to be actually voting for them. People who hold hands across America to demand that killers not be prosecuted should never get our economic support or support in any other way. We have to discipline our dollar, the same way we've finally begun to discipline our vote. People who carpetbag into our community should never get one single ballot from us. People who insult us, attack us, try to exploit us, refuse to ever spend their money with us, never ever speak up for our issues, these are people who should never get one thin dime from us. White power is able to enforce its will through economics. It can control who eats and who doesn't eat. And this is how it's able to incentivize tethers, shills, and bootlicks to undermine us from within. As I've long said, the problem we have with the enemy within is that these bootlicking backstabbers know that they can push anti-Black propaganda against us. They can be the constant mouthpiece for white power, make total fools of themselves attacking us, and still be able to eat the next day because white power will feed them. Does anyone think that Candace Owens wouldn't be a bag lady in New Jersey somewhere if it wasn't for white right-wingers putting her on and funding her? She's a clown putting on a show for their benefit, and were it not for them, she wouldn't be doing it because she knows that we wouldn't feed her. Look what happened to Michael Steele. He was talking that same claptrap until the Republicans threw him under the bus. Now all of a sudden, he's had a come-to-Jesus moment about the Republican Party. Yeah, because they're not feeding him anymore. There's simply no substitute for organized money. Money talks. And when you spend it with people who hate you, you're saying that you don't mind being abused. On the other hand, when you discipline your dollar and refuse it to spend it with any anti-Black racist, you're sending the clear message that their stomachs will touch their backbones before you see them get a dime from you. Too many people have been able to come into the Black community and been able to bootstrap their own economies off of us and then use the money that they get from us to attack us. You teach people to respect you because that which you cannot defeat, you have no choice but to accept. I get it that some Black folks don't mind, say, eating at restaurants that serve foreign food. Okay, but consider this. Black people created Southern seafood. That is a foundational Black American cuisine. Now, you got people from the Middle East, Asians, Hispanics who are not part of this culture, and yet they saw an opportunity to make money off of Black customers by setting up seafood restaurants. And of course, you've also had other groups who have set up fried chicken shacks like El Pollo Loco. Again, fried chicken is an FBA cuisine. And yet these immigrants have no problem getting into the food business outside of their own culture. If you as a Black person want, for example, Chinese takeout or what have you, then learn how to make it yourself. Black culture has only ever improved everything that it's touched. That's why everybody tries to vulture off of it. Everybody tries to find a way to imitate it. Imagine if instead of giving this power away, we decided to wield it for our own benefit. Now, I'm not saying that any amount of FBA skill or creativity would make Chinese takeout or Mexican dishes into soul food, but I am saying that at least it would finally have a pulse. Dr. John Henrik Clarke talked about that if there's anything you're interested in, you're supposed to be a producer of it. You like cars? Then you should be the one making them, or own a dealership or at the very least a repair shop. You like shoes? You should be making those. And if you like foreign foods, that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying you should be making it. At least you won't have to wonder whether it's fresh or where the meat came from. It simply makes no sense that you have nothing but Black people working at, say, the local Taco Bell, but you couldn't find a Black-owned Mexican food joint to save your life. And you wouldn't have to worry about whether or not people outside the community wouldn't patronize such a restaurant. We spend enough money with these kind of places, we can make ourselves rich on our own. See, when we don't do that, we're hustling backwards. For too long, we've gotten the game all wrong. We've conditioned everyone to see us as nothing more than an ATM, and it lets them think that our only purpose is to be used. I think the pandemic put a lot of Black people into a do or die situation, and as we've seen, we didn't die, but we still have so much more left to do. And that's the reason for this morning's briefing. To remind all of us that as Black people, that dollar does have power. Sure, we may not have as much as everyone else, but we can change that if we start to take control of where that dollar goes. Dr. John Henrik Clarke said that Black people will finally be free when we learn to look in the mirror and see a friend. I would add to that we should also learn to look in the mirror and see someone to do business with. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Alice Ransom, Jeffrey Williams, Frederica Moore, Mark Singleton, and Juan Latmore. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this.
Wait, Mark Singleton? Was that John Singleton's brother?
message.
I don't know.
Black empowerment only exists because of you.
All right, Shabaka. So we're going to close it out on that.
Yes, sir. So once again, Professor is speaking undisputed truth. Okay. And we appreciate, those liking and subscribing to Frontline Black News. Okay. Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced on StreamYard. Okay, we got to retweak it. So just stand by. Just keep following us here at Frontline Black News when we'll get it back up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bid everybody a good day from Sin City. All right.
All right. Thank you for joining me, Shabaka Grand Risings. Have a good day. All right. This is going to conclude season 10, episode 15 of Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced in conjunction with the Frontline Black News Grand Rising with Shabaka and the Chase. Join us tomorrow for a brand new episode of the Frontline Black News at approximately 10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So we will see y'all then. In the meantime, make sure y'all like and subscribe to all of our platforms, Frontline Black News on YouTube and Facebook, The Revolutionary Agenda on YouTube and Facebook, and Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced on Facebook and Twitter, now X. So peace, love, light, reparations, separate empowerment.
And please like and subscribe. And please like and subscribe to our like page of Shabaka'S Blacc Experience Enhanced on Facebook. And follow us on Twitter at Shabaka capital EXP.
Yep, I just said that, Shabaka. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So we'll see you tomorrow. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.
All right, I'm out. Okay.